Mr. Chairman, fellow committee members, first of all, I just want to say I appreciate your consideration and your time tonight. It's certainly looking like it could be a long night. I know many of you spend a lot of long nights up here looking for your constituents in the state, so I appreciate it, and I'll be here with you tonight. The bill before you today has a pretty simple goal. And to explain it, I want to share a story from a friend named Sarah. Sarah is a fitness instructor. She doesn't get any paid sick days at her job. She's got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old child. And recently they both came down with a pretty bad case of the flu. They'd already gotten sick earlier this year. Luckily, Sarah's husband was able to accrue a couple paid sick days at his job. So at that time, he stayed home with his kids and took care of them. He used all his time up. So right now, Sarah doesn't have much of a choice. She can either leave her sick kids at home, vomiting, or she can stay home with them and lose income. Obviously, she chose the latter. She stayed home. Now, Sarah's family is not poverty-stricken. They're getting by, but like so many Rhode Islanders, things are pretty tight. They're month to month, they're paying their bills, they're getting the basics. But losing even that couple days of pay can throw a big wrench in their monthly budget. And right now there's serious stress figuring out in that family how to deal with that hole. Now that's not some super dramatic anecdote. It's a pretty simple everyday story. And what we're saying today with this legislation is that it's a problem. It's a problem that for so many constituents in every single one of our districts, urban, suburban, rural, that's an everyday kind of story. Right now in Rhode Island, over 40% of private sector workers can't earn a single day of paid sick days. That means that every single day, people in our state are going to work while they're sick and contagious. People are stressing about losing needed income so they can stay home and take care of their kid. People are having to tell their elderly parents, sorry, we're not able to take the morning off to help you get to the doctor's office. That's real. And it's a reality that I would hope most of us can agree is far from ideal. And we as legislators have the ability to do something about it. So I'll briefly describe the legislation before you. The bill would ensure that all workers have the opportunity to earn up to 56 hours of paid sick time over the course of a year. The mechanism, workers could earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours they work, though I want to be very clear that that is flexible. That's a minimum standard. If an employer wanted to accrue differently, they wanted to do, say, a day for every month you work, or if you're working full-time, it takes you 6 weeks to earn 1 day, so a day every 6 weeks, they can totally do that under this legislation. There's also flexibility about how the business frames or calls the benefit. If they have a paid time off policy that meets those minimum standards, then they're already set under this bill. Workers can use the time they've accrued under this when they need it to recover from the sickness themselves or to care for a sick family member. And I do want to really caution the committee about prescribing that too strictly. The AARP is here, they're supportive of this legislation, among other reasons, because, as you know, many Rhode Islanders are caregivers for elderly family members. I've got an aunt, she's not like in my nuclear family, but she doesn't have any kids of her own. I'm the closest relative geographically. She's made it very clear to me that when she gets to that point, I'm responsible for helping her out. So I want us to understand the needs that different families are coming from when we're thinking about this. Workers can also use this as safe time. We'll hear more about this from the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, but when people experience domestic violence, they often need to take a day off from work to move out of their houses at a moment's notice, to deal with law enforcement. That's a situation where being economically vulnerable can be particularly dangerous, and so I think, again, most of us can agree we wouldn't want a person in those dangerous circumstances having to choose between their paycheck and their safety. Right now, that's a choice people have to make, and this bill will resolve that. Now, that's a bit of the basics. I'm sure we'll get more into it. There's a bunch of arguments for earning paid sick days. And you're going to hear those from people who are better able than me to talk about the specifics, about the public health implications, about the economic analyses that show a complete consensus that this does not have a negative impact on jobs or the economy. But before I give up the mic to all those better people who are here, I do want to stress that this is not about Rhode Island charting some new course on worker rights or human rights. This is about us catching up. I was talking with someone the other day who is in what turns out to be the small minority of Rhode Islanders statewide who do not support this policy. And he said something to the effect of, if we pass this, what's to stop the business from, rooting up and moving to Massachusetts? And I said, well, they already have this policy in Massachusetts. And it turns out they already have earned sick days policies in Connecticut and Vermont and New York. Unless we think this is a blue state thing or a Democratic thing, it's not. This past November, as one example, the state of Arizona, whose voters elected Donald Trump and John McCain and Republican majorities in Congress and in their state house and in their state senate, also overwhelmingly passed an earned sick leave policy just as generous as our neighbor in Massachusetts. Now, I said that friend of mine is in the small minority of Rhode Islanders, and that's not just a guess or a random claim. Later tonight, we'll hear from a pollster who conducted a statewide survey on this issue that found that even after hearing the arguments against earned sick leave that I'm sure we'll hear tonight, 8 out of 10 Rhode Islanders support this proposal, including a strong majority of Republicans. So while we will certainly hear from a bunch of folks tonight who will testify in opposition to this legislation, I do think it's worth keeping in mind that those voices are outnumbered approximately 5 to 1 in each of our communities. Now, having said that, I understand there's a lot of valid concern and questions from some members of the business community, and I certainly look forward to hearing from them and taking into account their input tonight. My hope is that we'll be able to sort out these concerns we hear into a few categories or buckets. One bucket is issues that we can recognize could present, a real challenge for certain businesses. So let's try to sit down and hash it out and figure out a way to work things out and find a resolution. For example, through conversations I've had with folks in the construction industry, I've gotten a better understanding of the particular circumstances of multi-employer CBAs, and I've been working with folks on language for exempting an alternative solution amendment there that I'd like to see when and if this legislation moves forward. So I'm sure there's a number of points that we can work on, and as I've expressed to the Chamber and the Hospitality Association and RIPEC, I am open to and I look forward to those good faith conversations. The second bucket I expect are some complaints that may be coming from an honest misinterpretation or misunderstanding of the legislation. I've certainly heard from people concerns about things in this bill that are not actually in this bill. So I'm hoping that over the course of tonight we can clarify some of those points. And then the third bucket, I suppose, will come down to core philosophy, right? Do we have the right as legislators to say that it's wrong that so many of our constituents have to make these gut-wrenching decisions between their family's health and their paycheck? Do we have the right to do something about it on behalf of our constituents and our communities in the state? That may be a philosophical debate that we can't exactly resolve, but I do hope that we make those decisions informed by actual evidence and reality. I'd urge people to not be freaked out by wild claims that this is going to pull the whole economy down. There have been a ton of studies in the many places that have passed this legislation finding that it has no negative impact on jobs and the economy. And as far as I know, and I've looked pretty hard, there haven't been any studies on the other side that have found the opposite conclusion. We have the opportunity with this bill to make a concrete, positive difference in the lives of hundreds of thousands of Rhode Islanders, the people who sent us up here to work for them. And I look forward to working with all of you. I think we're up to the challenge to get this done. So thank you very much for your consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.